G'day guys and welcome to Aussie English. My objective here is to teach you guys the English spoken down under. So whether you want to speak like a fair income Aussie or you just want to understand what the flippin' hell we're on about when we're having a yarn, you've come to the right place. So sit back, grab a cuppa and enjoy Aussie English. G'day guys, welcome to this episode of Aussie English, the number one podcast for everyone and anyone wanting to learn Australian English. As usual, at least as I try and do every single Wednesday, this is a new interview episode where I try to bring you an Australian and I chat to that Australian about their life, about what they do for work, what they do for a crust, how they earn a living, just about interesting things related to that person and life in Australia. And today's episode is no different. So today I had the pleasure of interviewing my little cousin, Rhys. Rhys is a really interesting fellow. So he is a pretty typical Aussie bloke. He has a pretty strong accent, which I think you guys are going to either love or hate, and you will see shortly what I mean. Rhys, absolutely love you, mate. Thank you so much, but you do speak incredibly quickly. He does mumble a little bit, and he changes his sentences halfway through saying them quite often. So that is why today's episode is definitely for advanced learners. You might have to listen to this one a couple of times because he speaks incredibly quickly. So make sure that you download the free download for today's episode, guys. You can read the transcript and you'll be able to better understand everything that Rhys is saying. Make sure you download the MP3 too. So just jump over to the website, the AussieEnglishPodcast.com, and go to the free download to get your free transcript. So today's an interesting episode because Rhys works as a brickie, and aside from this, is a world champion in karate. So we get to talk about both those things, although today's episode just focuses on being a brickie, laying bricks, working in Australia as a tradie, how to do that, how to find a job doing that, working as a brickie, a tradie, a sparky, whatever the trade is. If you're a tradie from overseas, there's a lot of content in today's episode that will hopefully help you with regards to things like getting paid, what to look out for with bosses, how to avoid dodgy jobs, as well as what it's like working with Aussie blokes. Quite often I hear from other listeners, as well as Australians that I know, that Aussie tradie blokes tend to be pretty brutal with the way that they joke around on the work site. So there's lots of jokes. They hang shit on each other, as we say, which means to tease each other. And Rhys talks quite a bit about this and what it's like and how you should view it, especially if you're a foreigner and you're not used to these kinds of jokes. Rhys goes into a bit of depth talking about that. Anyway, guys, the intro has gone long enough. I'm looking forward to bringing you this interview with Rhys. So Rhys, take it away. Let's get into it. All right, guys, welcome to this episode of Aussie English. I'm at my uncle, auntie, and cousin's Christmas party. We've just had a few beers, had some, what do we have? Meat, veggies.
Yeah, a bit of potato salad.
And then some fruit salad for dessert.
Yeah, some prawns actually as well.
But I got my cousin Rhys out here, my little cousin Rhys. How old are you now, Rhys?
23.
23, so he's 7 years younger than me. But Rhys has become, I guess you would say, you're still a bricklayer, or you're not a bricklayer anymore, a brickie?
Yeah, so I still do bricklaying, but I work with a landscaper, so I still get to do it every so often, but more just like laying pavers, do a bit of everything in like the trade sense.
Yeah. And aside from that, you're a world champion martial artist as well.
Yeah. So when I was when I was like 17, I won a World Cup in karate, and yeah, been doing karate for about 12 years. So
yeah. So that was the main reason I wanted to get you on, to talk about being a brickie and how that got started, and then to talk about obviously karate and where that's taken you. Mm-hmm. So can we talk about bricklaying? How on earth did you end up doing that? And was that something you always wanted to do, or did you just fall into a trade after you finished high school?
So for me, I wasn't very keen on school, when there was a program at like a TAFE, where it was every Wednesday you'd go in and do like a trowel trade. So I did bricklaying, a bit of plastering, a bit of rendering, a bit of pretty much any sort of trade with a trowel, so like tiling and stuff like that as well. And I was really good at bricklaying. I just sort of had a knack for it. And then I got offered a job straight on the spot, and I think I was 15. But my parents said, no, you got to stay in, at least finish year 10 until I was 16. So then straight away after that, I did another course where every Wednesday for a year I would go in to do bricklaying. And then I left school and got a job pretty much instantly. I met a guy at the doctor's, actually. He was a brickie. And then I liked the trade. It was like fun for me to do, and I was good at it. So I sort of just fell into it like that by talking to the guy. And then, just sort of took off from there, did an apprenticeship, and yeah.
So what kind of skills do you need to have if you want to be a bricklayer, especially a successful bricklayer? What are the kind of attributes or skills that are required or that you have to develop as you're learning?
I think it's more like I think a lot of people get caught up with the actual laying of the bricks. It's not actually that difficult to lay bricks. It's more about setting everything up and working like time management. So, working out which walls you want to tackle first. If it's hot in, the Australian summer, you want to be on the shade side and sort of work your way around following the shade rather than sitting in the sun, because, it's going to take a toll on you. You're going to get tired and things like that. So I think it's more about being smarter, not so much just thinking about you have to lay as many bricks as possible, doing it the most efficient way possible. Also, obviously, you need to be physically fit. If you can't, lift a wheelbarrow full of mud or a wheelbarrow full of bricks, it's going to make life a lot harder. And just generally being motivated to, when you get to work, you get there, you do your 8 hours, and then you go home.
That's crazy. So what kind of numbers are we talking with, like, how many bricks you've laid in a single day? Are we talking hundreds, thousands?
So usually the standard you want to get to is 400 per person per day. That's usually the standard. You can lay more. So if there's a group, we used to have a group of 3, we'll be aiming for about 1,500 per day, depending on the walls though. So if you've got a nice long straight wall, no windows, things like that in there, you're laying for a bit higher because you don't have any sort of obstacles in the way. If you've got a house with like windows and stuff like that, you might aim for a little bit lower. You might be trying to get to your 400 and stuff like that per day. But that's usually about 400 a day is the goal. But if you get more, you get a little bit less. It sort of just depends on the walls and stuff like that.
And is it pretty competitive with the other guys, like who can reach this number first or get the most done first? Or
it kind of does, especially like as an apprentice, because you kind of like have that sense of you want to prove yourself. So a lot of the times you will race with your boss and you'll try to lay more bricks. But usually what happens is because you're not physically used to doing that much labour and that much work, the next day you might lay 500 on Monday, and then Tuesday you might lay 300 because your hands are sore or your arms are sore or stuff like that because you've been working quite hard. So it's more about consistency as well. So if you consistently can lay 400 each day, it's kind of better than going, I laid 1,000 on the first day but couldn't go to work the next day because I was too tired or too sore.
Was that something that shocked you too? Did it take a long time to work up the strength to be able to do, days where you have to lay 400 bricks and then the next day and the next day? Do people go in and burn themselves out by trying to lay too much at once? And is it something that takes years to develop, or is it a lot quicker?
I found because obviously as an apprentice, when you're an apprentice, you pretty much do all the labouring and all you do the crappy jobs basically.
Yeah.
But once you start getting onto basically as a brickie you get called, you get to sit on the line, which basically means you're laying all the bricks. It took about maybe a month of doing that every day for me to actually get used to being able to lay 300 to 400 bricks consistently every day. More just my wrists and my actual hands, because having to grab the bricks and hold them each day. And picking up the trail of mud every day, like your wrists get really sore from doing that, and your shoulders. But about a month it took me to get used to it, because I suppose because you're doing it every day, you don't really have a chance to have a break. Whereas if you have a break and then you try and start it again, you'll sort of lose that muscle memory and that strength. So it basically took about a month, I think. So if you did it for a month and you can practice and get that chance to actually sit on the line each day, your body will adapt to be able to do that every day.
Yeah, crazy. And so, living in Australia, is it interesting for you that you would imagine living in such a quote unquote well-off country where everyone can get highly educated, that there are more and more young men going into trades these days? And what are the main things pulling them away from, say, going to university for another 10 bloody years to get a degree or a master's and a PhD? What are the main things pulling people towards, say, you know, not even finishing high school, but ending up with a job like being a Brickie or a Sparky or a Chippy?
I think because you can be quite successful with it, and it's not so much about the education, it's more about the fact that, as you said, you know, 6 or 7 years studying, and there's no real guarantee you're going to get a job. So it makes it kind of like, especially for me, it was lucky because I've got you, I've got my older brother as well, who before I'd even left school were already in university, and I knew people who were in university and they'd finished and it's struggling to get a job. And, you know, we have our cousin Meg, she lives in Sydney, and she finished, you know, a double degree. And
this is my cousin, for context, Megan. Yeah, so she came over from Canada and did a degree here but couldn't find a job.
So, you know, and I had that sort of benefit of going, well, I can still do all those studies at university, but there's no real guarantee, whereas a trade, they always need a trade, you know what I mean? And you can
houses
still be
need
successful.
To be built.
That's it, you know what I mean? People want to live in houses, they need to be built. Someone's going to do it. And you can still be really successful in doing that. And, I mean, eventually, if you play your cards right and you work hard and you do it properly, eventually you don't actually have to be on the tools. You can go and quote jobs and have a set group of workers that are going to be doing the job for you, and then you don't actually have to be on the tools, but you still are a bricklayer.
Yeah.
You know, or you still are a Sparky, but you don't actually have to do all the manual labour. You still might go in each day, you know, some here and there to get a job done if you need a few extra guys or something like that, but you can eventually get off the tools. And you know, you can still be earning really good coin, as opposed to, you know, you might spend 6 or 7 years and then you might not even get a job for another 2 years or something like that.
That's exactly it.
So
is that the main aim too of most tradies these days? It's not to be like the old school guys. You know, when we were growing up, a lot of my friends' parents were these, you know, say old Greek or Italian dudes who were brickies and had worked for 50 years in that job, and their bodies were just totally torn up. And, you know, they couldn't sit down without being in pain. Is there more of an educated sort of take on that these days, and trying to get you out of using tools for your entire life and more towards, say, like managing your own business and having your own guys than, just sticking to the tools and smashing it out for your entire life?
I think is especially, I mean, I can only really speak from like my generation, because a lot of my friends are tradies, that pretty much everybody that I know who's a tradie is roughly around my age, you know, give or take. That is generally the goal, is to get to a point where either you're running your own business and you're not on the tools, and you choose to go in when you want to, or if you need a few extra people just to, you know, get a job done or whatever to help lift something, then you might pop in. Or the other instance is to become like a project manager or a site foreman, where the physical labour isn't there. Okay, it's a lot more mental strain, because you've got to be organising, you know, 6 or 7 blokes and making sure that everyone's making their quota, you're making money and they're making money, and also the business itself is making money. Or, you're going to more of like a commercial side of thing, where you're a foreman, or, you know, you're a site supervisor, something like that, where the labour intense side is not, it's not going to basically, as you said, you're not going to be working for 50 years doing that trade and absolutely be wrecked by the end of it. I know for a fact that everybody that I know that's a tradie, that's the end goal, and it's basically just taking the steps that you need to do towards that. You know, it's not going to happen overnight. You're not going to be doing it at, you know, 23 or stuff like that. It's more looking at 30, 35 when you've got a family and stuff like that. So you're not having to do all that physically demanding labour that's going to, you know, limit you to being able to play with your kids, you know, play a bit of footy with your kids, or, you know, take them swimming and stuff like that, or, you know, being able to actually be active at that age rather than, you know, slugging it out. And you still might make a lot of good money, but you can't really enjoy your life afterwards.
I was going to get on to talking about foreigners who've come over to Australia and could potentially, obviously, do these jobs, or maybe they did these jobs in their home countries. Would you encourage listeners who are potentially not living in Australia to come over here and take up bricklaying, or continue doing this job over here? Is it easy enough for foreigners to get into as well?
I find, to be honest, I mean, I'm only speaking from the people that I've worked with who are foreigners, whether they be, you know, from England, from India, from, you know, Asia, and any sort of like place, that they actually work a lot harder, because especially if they're trying to get citizenship here or residency, that there's a lot more on the line for them. For us, it's, you know, it's just a paycheck. You know, you might not get as much as you got last week because you didn't work hard enough, or, you know, I think we take it a bit for granted how lucky we are that there's so much work available and it's so easy to get. Like, especially if you're working in a trade, it's pretty impossible not to get a job. You know, if you really want to work, you'll find something. You just got to be wanting to do, you know, the harder jobs sometimes, to then maybe get, you know, do the harder jobs for a few months, and then it's going to lead into something that's going to make, you know, a lot better. Or I mean, and if you've got the trade background, so if you are, you know, a brickie in your own country and you're thinking maybe to come over here for some work, I mean, generally most of the time they work a lot harder, and they're, you know, there's no skill difference. It's more just about getting out there and, you know, putting yourself out there to get the jobs, rather than just, you know, chucking out a few messages. You've got to actively seek the, you know, jobs. If you drive past a job site, or if you go on the train past a job site, pop in, let them know that you're looking for work, and they'll probably, you know, tradies know tradies.
Yeah.
So I might not know somebody to, you know, for looking for brickies, but I know a friend of a friend who's a brickie who needs, you know, blokes to help him out. So there's always ways of getting, you know, people who are always asking for, you know, extra blokes for work and stuff like that. So if you talk to one bloke, you know, they're going to be surely know somebody who needs an extra hand.
And what sort of advice would you have for them for coming to Australia? Say they're the best brickie in the world, they get the job, they come to the site, but they feel like they don't mix well with the people there, or they can't communicate with them as well as they'd like. I've heard that from a few friends before, where they say they just seem to be teased quite a bit, or that they just don't understand the slang or the accents. What kind of advice would you have for those people on how to learn the language or better fit in as well in these kinds of sites? Should they take this kind of stuff seriously with regards to, like, say, being teased? Just, do you want to talk about that for a sec? I
think for me, like, majority of the time, especially like in a trade atmosphere, there is a lot of I won't really call it bullying, because it's all in good fun. Like, it's very, I mean, me speaking personally, I've been on loads of different sites, worked with loads of different crews, that majority of the time everyone's just taking the piss. Like, we're just having a bit of a laugh. Sometimes it gets a little bit personal, and generally for me, I usually just, whoever's, you know, sort of takes it a bit too far, I usually just take them to the side afterwards, like, not in front of everybody else, and say, look, I don't really appreciate you talking like that, you know, or mentioning stuff like that. I'm all for a laugh, and, you know, if you make a mistake or you slip over in the mud or something like that and you get your clothes dirty, look, I'm all for a laugh. You know, if you want to make a bit of fun of me and stuff like that, I just, you know, I laugh with you, it's funny, we get over it and stuff like that. But I feel like if it ever gets taken a bit too far, just to talk to the person who did, you know, one-on-one, don't do it in a group and stuff like that, and just sort of address it and just say, look, I don't appreciate it. Like, I'm all, you know, job sites are meant to be fun. You're meant to have a bit of a laugh and, you know, take the piss a little bit with each other. But if it sort of oversteps the boundaries a bit, I feel like you should just, talk to the person who did and just sort of let them know that you don't appreciate it. And, you know, generally most of the time tradies are pretty good. Sometimes, you know, in the heat of the moment, you might say something that's, you know, you shouldn't have said, and generally they probably agree with what you're saying. It's probably just the best option to talk to them about it, you know, one-on-one, just, you know, after it happens, or at the end of the day, or at the start of the next day, just to let them know. But that's probably the way I would say it. Whenever I've had an issue with somebody, I've always sort of spoken to them, like, personally after work or the next day in the morning.
I guess that's an important thing to know too, that it's not just unique to foreigners getting, say, you know, teased by Australian blokes. It is just that you guys tend to do this to one another, and it's an important thing, I guess, is it's almost like telling kids at school not to react to bullies, because it's almost like people are testing you to see how you're going to react. And I think for me at least, most of the time I've been in these environments, people are looking to see that you can take a joke, and that they want to see if they can press your buttons, right? And you need to try not to show them that it's affecting you. But it is, if it does get that bad, always either talk to the person or talk to the manager or someone.
Yeah, exactly.
But what advice would you have too for the language and how to fit in learning the language that's spoken? Because I know that it is pretty it's a lot more full of slang than, say, what I would experience at university or in a job in a cafe or something. What sort of advice would you have if you had an Indian bricklayer come and work with you and he said to you, I want to speak how you guys speak? Do you have any advice for those sorts of people?
I think exactly what you said, if they actually come up and ask you and say, look, I know for 100% for me, if we had, anybody who, I've lived overseas and stuff like that before, and I have to explain sometimes what I'm speaking about or talking about, just because
even to native English speakers, right?
Yeah, even to native. I lived in England, and even people who speak English there would struggle understanding what I was trying to convey sometimes, just because of you slip into your slang and they don't really understand what you're saying, but. I think, the golden rules, if you approach somebody and say, look, I want to I want to learn to speak the slang and understand what you guys are talking about, because even for me, some people that I meet, I'm like, what? I don't understand what they're saying, and then, usually I'll just ask them, and then it clicks and it kind of, makes sense. So if you ask the people that, especially if you get hired, I would just talk to the boss and say, look, I want to learn the slang, and, I want to just approach them more. Approach with the guys and say, look, if I can, is it okay if I ask, if I don't understand or something like that, what you're saying, and you can explain it to me, then, that's you've already gone leaps and bounds in terms of understanding the slang, because, as I said, sometimes I don't understand what people are saying, so it's just more about, you just ask. If you don't understand what they're saying, or just approach them beforehand at the start of the day, and then maybe they can even just give you a few things that they already say off the top of their head, and explain it. That way, you already sort of have a rough idea.
Exactly, and I think that goes for any area that you're working in Australia. I would say try and pay attention to these things. Ask someone. Don't just let it slip by, because you won't pick it up if you let it constantly keep sort of going past. And then, take a note of it and try using it. Try saying it the next day. Don't be afraid of saying it incorrectly, because I'm sure that, at wherever you work, if someone was to say something incorrectly, you're just going to have a sort of laugh and a giggle, correct them, and then move on. Yeah,
if anything, I think it kind of adds to the camaraderie. And
that you can take a joke and that people can take the piss.
Yeah, exactly. Like a lot of the workplace I work at the moment, pretty much everybody has a nickname. And one of the guys has a nickname, he mumbles a lot, so we call him Mumbles, and it's stuck like glue. So I wouldn't take it as a bad thing if you muddle up some sort of slang that you're trying to use, because it's probably going to end up being your nickname, and it's going to actually, if anything, it's going to put you more within the group rather than push you away.
I think that goes with teasing a bit too, right? If people don't tease you, it's almost like you should probably, in these kinds of environments, potentially be a bit worried, because I remember being at jiu-jitsu and asking one of the guys there, why are you constantly making fun of me, mate? Do you not like me? Or is there something I can do, to fit in better? And he's like, mate, we do. That's why we're teasing you. If we didn't like you, we wouldn't talk to you.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's I know for the boss that I work with, we're really quite close with him. And generally, there's me, the boss, and another guy who are sort of the main three workers. And basically, if we're not making fun of you and including you in the jokes, it might be more directed at you or something like that. But I wouldn't take it personally. I would think that if anything, you're more included. And I get teased all the time at work as well. But everybody knows that we can take a joke, and I'll give it back as well. So if you are getting included by being, it's kind of, I wouldn't really like to use the word bullying and tease. It's more just like you're just having a bit of fun, and just if you notice something like, I wore a t-shirt that said Rockstar on it, so then I became Rockstar Rhys. So it was a thing to be teased about, but then it kind of it kind of stuck as a nickname, and then now it's funny. You know what I mean? We all laugh about it, and then if I ever wore it again, everyone will be like, hey, Rockstar.
I think that's a very Australian thing too, is learning to take a joke and not take stuff too seriously. And you should be able to tell when to take it seriously and when not to. But that's, I guess, something that you have to kind of learn. If you come from a completely different culture, it can be a bit of a shock sometimes. But I think you have to come into it knowing, all right, Australians have a sense of humour and they like to joke with one another, especially their closest friends will usually cop the brunt of these kinds of jokes. And if they don't joke with you, they probably don't like you very much.
Yeah, exactly. I think you've hit the nail on the head there, where it's exactly exactly what you're saying. If you're not getting included in jokes with, I mean, all of my I'm a short person, and all my friends always tease me about it. Whatever. If we're going out shopping, they'll, oh man, I think there's room in the 6-year-old girls aisle or something like that for you.
And then you remind them that you're a black belt in karate and kick the shit out of them.
Exactly. But and that's just the way things work. I've got a mate who's like he's quite heavy set. So whenever we go, oh mate, I don't know if you're allowed on the lift as well with us. It's going to be too heavy and stuff like that. But it's because he's my mate that I do that. I wouldn't just walk up to somebody who he's heavier on the heavier side and just tell them that if I don't know who they are.
And if you were actually worried that they were too heavy to get in the lift, you probably wouldn't say anything. You just wouldn't go in the lift.
Exactly. But I suppose, especially for a construction side of thing, exactly what you said. If you're not sort of being included in the jokes, and even a little bit directed at you or directed at other people, you're more included in the group. So I wouldn't take it to heart. And most of the things that are said on the job site are, they're just throwaway comments. They just say them.
Do you have any other do's and don'ts, I guess, for working on a job site in Australia, especially if you've come from a different culture, speak a different language? And are there things like, say, making sure you go to Friday night drinks and that sort of stuff that the listeners should try and do?
Yeah, so especially if you're first starting off, you might, if you get like a Friday night drink or something like that, if they offer you to come, I would say 100% you should go, because you've been asked to come in and join the other the workers, and it's gonna make you more included in the group. It's gonna make work life a lot better. I would say the first time you get invited, 100% go. Obviously, if it doesn't work with your schedule and you've got things to do, like after that, then you might have to miss a couple here and there. But if the first time you definitely get invited, I would say 100% you should go, just because it's going to increase that camaraderie, and it's going to make you more included in the group, and just going to make work life a lot better.
What are your thoughts if you were to start working at a work site and there's just one guy who constantly doesn't want to hang out with you outside of work? How does that make you and everyone else there feel too?
I think for me, I'm not really too stressed about it. Sometimes you just don't get along with some people, and some people are just there, they want to do their job and go home. So I think, I would always make an effort. I'll try and make an effort, most days. If I'm going out somewhere with a couple of the guys from work, I'll always invite as many people as I can, because, it's just what you do. If you're going out for a couple of beers after, work, if we're right near a pub, we invite everybody. If everybody wants to come down, we're going to have a couple of drinks, more than welcome to.
And this is probably the most important thing if you're from an overseas country and you want to make Australian friends, it's make sure you socialise with these people.
Yeah, even if, as you're saying, if you're struggling to understand what people are saying and stuff like that, just being there is going to make it, it's going to make it a whole lot better. Just, by having a presence there, you will get included into things, they'll invite you out. Just being there is going to be, so much better than if you're not.
And if for no other reason but to practice your English.
Exactly. You're going to get a really good opportunity to practice your English. And I suppose when you're on not even on a job site or something like that, and you're having beers, it's going to give you an even better opportunity to go, oh, look, what do you mean by this? Or, am I saying this right? Or something like that. Because it's a less more, when you're at work, you've got things to do. So you can't really stop people and ask them, am I saying this correctly? Because you've got certain things you have to get done for the day. Whereas you're having a couple of beers, you can sit there and talk for 20 minutes about, this is the way you say it this way, and, whatever it might be.
And so I guess a few more little housekeeping things about being a tradie in Australia. What was it like when you first started with regards to pay, and how has it ended up today? Like, for people interested in wanting a career in Australia, what kind of income can they get as an Australian bricklayer when they start all the way up to where you're at currently?
So it depends on the age. So I'm assuming most people who'd be moving to Australia or trying to become a resident of Australia, they're probably going to be over the age of 21, which would make you a mature age student. So I'm not exactly sure on the exact pay of a mature age student, but I'm close to saying I think it's about $700 a week, and that's on a wage. And that's if you're a first year or a second year, a first year. And then I think the increase isn't as much as if you were younger. So for me, I started on about $360 a week as a first year, but then the jump was big. It was up to $500 when I was a second year. So I think the jumps are less frequent, but because you're obviously mature age, you've got rent, you've got food, you've got, your car, you've got more bills and stuff to pay. They start you off quite high, and then the jump isn't as big. If you're a qualified bricklayer, you can pretty much expect to get about close to 350 to 400 a day. And that's if you're a subcontractor. If you're on a wage, it might be a bit different because they're including things like super, tax, and your annual leave and things like that. So it might be a little bit less. But in the long run, it means less stress for you about having to work out your own tax. And what you get is what you take home. As opposed to if you're subcontracting, you need to have a bit of... manage your money a little bit better, where you need to save a little bit for your tax, maybe put away more for your super, and if you need any insurances, you have to pay for them as well. Whereas if you're on wages, you're covered under the boss. So it kind of depends on which way you go. If you're starting out and they don't know who you are, maybe you'll probably get put on a little bit less, and then once you prove yourself, you can you either get a bonus or you can ask for more money. And most bosses are pretty okay with you speaking to them about a pay rise and stuff like that. Generally, the way I always go about it, if I feel like I want more money, is I approach my boss, whoever it may be, and I ask them, what do I need to be doing to be getting more money?
Yeah.
And I explain my thoughts, and then I get theirs back. And you just basically talk to them like, a person. Don't go in there saying you want more money and sort of demanding it. You just sort of ask, look, I want more money. What can I be doing? And then they'll have a few list of things that they would want you to be doing. Or they might have a few things that they want you to be doing better. Maybe you're doing all the work, but it's just quite not up to scratch. So it's just a couple of those things that you could do to increase your chance of getting a pay rise or getting more money. But in the terms of bricklaying, as long as you land the bricks straight and everything's good, it's just about the quantity you're putting in per day. Depending on whether you're doing piers and stuff like that, there's all sorts of different variations to the way you can get paid. But generally, I would just say talk to your boss. If you've done 3 months and you're still on the same wage and you're qualified, just ask them, look, I want to get more money. What steps can we do to make this happen, sort of thing? Because if you're getting paid more money, you're obviously making him more money. So it's better for him in the long run anyway.
And so what kind of things do people need to look out for too, so that they're not taken advantage of if they come over here to Australia and get a job as a bricklayer and say instead of being given a wage on a contract, they're being paid cash in hand? Are there any things that you would say, make sure that this isn't happening, or make sure that you're getting this?
I think if you get a contract, read it and, go through it. And if you don't understand, get somebody who is, competent in English and can read it and understand it. And maybe they speak your language and then they can convey it back to you, because you don't want to sort of get any little hidden clauses or anything else like that, or something that they might say, if you make a mistake once, you're gone, and they don't have to give you any notice. So if you've got a contract there, just make sure you read it and understand it. If you don't have a contract and you're getting paid cash, it's a bit dicey because you don't have a contract and you're not on their books. So they can pretty much, the work's going to be if there's no work on, you're not going to be getting a day's work. So if you're getting paid cash, I'll be prepared, or maybe have a backup, plan B. So if you're getting paid cash and the job's good, even just, keep in touch with your boss and just say, look, can you just let me know if work's going to go a bit quiet and give me like a week's notice so I can, sort something out, rather than him just saying, look, tomorrow there's nothing on for you for the next 4 weeks.
And you're caught with your pants down.
Yeah, and you just, you're in a bit of a pickle. So I had to have a plan B. So, always be sort of looking out and seeing if there's anybody, especially if you're getting paid cash. If you're getting paid cash and you can have a look on, things like Gumtree or, any sort of classifiers, and see if there's anybody who needs brickies, and just call them. You just call them and say, look, I'm a brickie at the moment, what are you offering? I'm putting in this many per day. And most blokes will give you a day trial, and if you live up to your your expectations, or what you've said you're going to do. So if you say, look, I'm going to put in 400 a day on a straight wall, every day, if you're doing it, then you can pretty much make sure, if you're saying, look, I want 350 a day or whatever it might be, you're probably going to get it. As long as you're not going to say, look, I'll put 600 in a day and you're only getting 300, then you need to be able to live within your means. So if you can do this every day, and he's happy with you doing that, and he's happy to pay you that, then you're going to be able to do that easier, I suppose, rather than if you just sort of work with one bloke and sort of put a lot of trust in them. Especially if you're getting paid cash, it's very likely that they'll just, as soon as it's costing them money to have you, you're going to get the flick.
Yeah. And so I guess before we switch on to karate, out of all the trades, what would you say are the benefits and the cons, I guess, the pros and the cons of doing each one of these, and which one, if you could start from scratch, would you pick? So you've got being a brickie, bricklayer, chippy, carpenter, dunny diver, plumber, and then say a sparky, an electrician, out of all of those, which have it best?
I think it sort of depends on whether you're talking about domestic or commercial. I think brickies physically have it the hardest, just because it's not always, other trades have to do really physically parts of their job, whereas ours is consistently every day you're going to be doing a hard job. It might not be the hardest, you might not have to be lifting up, 200 kilo beams as a chippy or something like that, helping out to, do a second level floor. But every day you're going to be putting in at least, 300 to 400 bricks a day. So every day you're going to come home, you're going to be tired.
It's just this consistent labour.
Consistent labour, yeah, exactly. Chippies, I think it's quite good if you're, some days you might be doing a lot of finishing off, so it's not as physically demanding, it's a more technical side. But then other days, you might be putting up frames and lifting up whole walls and stuff like that, so it's physically demanding. Plumbing, it's, dunny divers, it's a bit of a, pardon the pun, shit job. But that's for me. There's so many different aspects of plumbing and all trades really that you got to look for. But if you're doing a domestic trade, you're going to be dealing with toilets and stuff like that. So if you're not a big fan of bad smells and things like that, there's obviously a downside of that. I think, in my opinion, probably sparkies are the best, just because of one, you don't have to carry around a lot of tools, so getting from job to job, it's not as physically demanding, just having to pick up all your stuff. You can carry a bag around with screwdrivers, your pliers, and various other things like that. You can chuck it on a tool belt and you're ready to go. And also, the only real downside is if you're going to get zapped. Yeah. But generally nowadays the safety standards are quite high, so it's very few and far between.
Oh, awesome, man. Well, we should just quickly switch on to karate, I guess.
All right, guys, so I hope you enjoyed that episode. Remember, get the free download via the AussieEnglishPodcast.com. You should be able to find the link in the description for today's episode to this episode, where you can get the transcript and you can get the MP3. You can download them both and you can read and you can study this episode. Remember, listen a few times if you're having a little bit of trouble catching everything that Rhys says. It's good practice because there are a lot of Australians who speak like this, especially blokes who work as tradies, okay? You're rougher Australians. So also remember, if you would like to study today's episode in more depth, sign up to the Aussie English Classroom, where you get all the bonus content for today's interview episode. And you also get all the bonus content for all the previous interviews. So the whole point of that section, that course in the Aussie English Classroom, is to give you access to different accents in Australian English. You have a listening comprehension quiz that you go through as you listen to an excerpt for about 5 to 10 minutes from this interview, and have to answer those questions, and you get a mark at the end for that quiz to see how well you were able to understand what was being said. And then also you get to study in depth the different vocab, the different expressions, and the little bits of English like, like, those sorts of interesting parts of the English language that aren't often focused on. I love talking about why and when they are used by native speakers. So if you want to study this interview in depth, make sure you sign up to the Aussie English Classroom, and remember, it's just $1 for the first 30 days. I'll see you in there, guys. Once again, big thanks to my little cousin Rhys for chatting to me about being a brickie and what it's like in Australia working as a tradie. Remember, guys, there will be another episode in the near future where Rhys continues chatting to me about what it's like doing karate, what it's like being a world champion in karate, and how he ended up doing that and where it's taken him today. Okay, so he's actually just left Australia to live overseas and follow his career teaching karate. So he's actually left being a bricklayer behind, and he's now teaching karate full time. Anyway, I look forward to giving you that episode in the future, guys. Stay tuned, and I'll see you next Wednesday for another interview episode. Catch you later, guys. G'day, mate. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Aussie English Podcast. If you wish to support the podcast and help me keep bringing you content, you can do so via my Patreon page. Remember, it's my mission here at Aussie English not only to help you understand Australian English, but to speak it like a native. If that's your goal, make sure you enroll in the Aussie English Classroom, guys, where you'll get all the bonus content for today's episode designed to improve your English even faster. Have a ripper of a day, and I'll see you in class.